when I've worked in the mining industry in the Congo before joining a state authority. So I will probably very briefly also talk a little bit about my experience in the mining industry in the Congo, eventually in the Q&A session. But for now, I think I'll leave it here so Matthias can take over again.
Great. I will jump straight into the questions that we have and the questions that maybe you also have about mining and minerals. And so in front of you, you have a few questions that we will come back to at the end. And you can try and keep these in mind as we speak about mining and about the Congo. And these are things that we often hear from people that are interested or have questions. Is mining, is it good or bad? Does it lead to conflict and war? Who owns minerals in the ground? Who makes money from minerals? Who decides where mines should be? Do we need mining? These are the general questions we often get when we talk about mining, minerals, and such matters. So keep these things in mind, and we will return to them later. I don't know how familiar you are with mining in the places where you live, if you have mining close to you, or if mining is something that you know from newspapers, TV, or from studying. Where I am, we have mines in this area. So I've grown up with mining, and we have mines in this area. Yes, so that's questions about mining and society in general. Keep them in mind, and we'll return to them later. And then questions we get about mineral resources and the Democratic Republic particularly is like, why are certain minerals coming from the Congo? Why aren't they coming from somewhere else? Do we really need them? Are these minerals making people poor? Does it lead to conflict? Why are there children working in mining in Congo, and so on? And should we just try and not buy any minerals or metals from the Congo? Those are the type of questions that you should sort of, well, we can return to them and so on. But before we continue to talk about mining, minerals, and Congo in particular, a few basic words that I want you to think about. We're going to talk about not so much, but there's rocks. You know, the rocks that make up the Earth's crust. What we are standing on is made out of rocks. You might be familiar to this. I'm not sure. And the rocks that we have under our feet are made out by individual minerals. And those minerals are made up by elements, the elements of the periodic table. Okay, so when you have many minerals that are really useful in one place, it makes a deposit, a mineral resource. Okay, and a person like me, I go around trying to find a place where I can find a lot of minerals that contain copper. I go to a place to find a lot of minerals containing gold and so on. Okay, and when we take those minerals out of the ground, we make a mine. Okay, so we have the mine where we find the rocks that have the minerals, and the minerals have the elements that we need. It can be copper, it can be lithium, it can be iron, it can be aluminium, or so on. Okay, so there's lots and lots of minerals, many different ones, more than 4,000, actually more than 5,000 probably. And minerals will contain elements. They can contain metals. And most often when people think about mining and taking minerals out of the ground, it's to produce metals, copper, gold, iron, aluminium. Of course, you can get other things from a mine as well, like cement or gravel or sand. But today we're talking about particularly the metals that come out of the ground. Okay, so to illustrate this, if you look to the one side where you have a picture of a mine, up in the north of Sweden, where I am from. This is the Aitik mine. It's a large open pit. It's about almost 3 kilometers long, 400 meters deep. And it's a mine where we get some copper from, mostly copper. And in that mine, which is huge, a really big open pit mine, in that mine we have, if you looked on the other side, you have small little yellow shiny minerals. And those minerals contain copper. So in this very big mine, we will take the minerals that we want out of the mine, and from those minerals we make copper, metal. You have to apply heat and melt them and so on. And when we made the copper, we sell it to, let's say, Italy, and someone in Italy will make a car or something out of it, and it ends up in water pipes, in electric vehicles, in your mobile phone and computers. So that's how we dig out of the ground the mineral that we want, and from that mineral we take out the metal we want, and from that metal we make the products we need. And so that's the background to mining. I don't know if you've seen big mines like this. We have a few up here in Sweden. There's many of them in the Congo as well. So I keep checking on my watch, my clock, as I'm not talking for too long. So we use a lot of things, like now when we're talking to each other using the mobile phone or a computer, the electricity that powers the mobile phone or your computer now comes from a generator that is made from copper wiring, and the screen that you're looking at now has probably gallium and indium, which are rare metals that make the colors of the screen and so on. So the things you have around you now and the things we use to communicate contains lots and lots of elements from the periodic table. If you look to one side of the screen there, you see the year 2000. We use palladium, rhodium, tellurium, lithium, thorium, titanium, lead, so many things. Basically all the elements in the periodic table are used to build the things we use every day and that we use now as we speak. And all of those elements come from minerals, and all of those minerals come from rocks that we find in mines. Okay, so 300 years ago, we didn't use so many different types of metals and minerals, but now we do, because our technology is complex, we are more people, and so on. So this is why why mining is also changing, because what we need today is maybe not the same thing we will need tomorrow. Tomorrow we will need more solar panels, we will need more electric vehicles, but we will need less of something else. So the minerals that we need are going to be different tomorrow than from today. Something to keep in mind. So in the Congo, this is a super complicated picture you have in front of you, but it basically says that in many technologies, batteries, fuel cells, wind generation, tractors, motors, solar panels, and so on, we are using elements, niobium, cobalt, and other metals. I can see that the red circles have ended up in the wrong place, but copper, cobalt, they actually come from the Congo as well as from other parts of the world. In particular, cobalt, and you could also say maybe niobium, are metals that come from cobalt, from the Congo a lot. So many things that we need and that we are using in modern technology to make renewable energy, to make high-tech items, many of the things we use to build those items come from the Congo. And that's why we're here today. I think, okay, so here's a picture of a mine in the Congo where I think both Jonathan and I have been. In this mine, we are extracting minerals out of the ground that contain cobalt. Okay, so there's a mine with an excavator, there's a process plant where you take the cobalt out of the minerals, and then the bottom picture there is a truck loaded with the product from that mine, which is cobalt and copper. In the same area where the first picture was, there's also extraction of cobalt by small-scale mining, by artisanal methods. And that's how it can look. People who are manually excavating the ground, up on the left. The other side, you see people washing the minerals containing cobalt in water. And the bottom picture is a place where cobalt is then sold to whoever wants to buy. And keep those pictures in your head when I hand over to Jonathan. So mineral resources, conflict, poverty, how is that linked to the DRC? I think you've heard about it. You've seen pictures of child labor, of poverty, you know about corruption, about violence against the women in the Congo. And Jonathan is going to give us a brief, well, not brief, it's a very long but important background to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. All right. Jonathan, are you ready for the next part?
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Yep. Is it all good?
It's if you can switch the display, we see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Is it better now? Are you able to see the display?
We cannot see your screen yet.
I've got a bit of a problem here, but I will try again.
Now, perfect.
Does it work?
Yes, I can see.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Excellent. I guess Matthias has given a pretty good overview of the use of raw material that we have, from going from the back in the days until the 2000s today. So with the current technology, some of the metals that are mostly in use are the parts of the periodic table that is called rare earth metal, and there are other heavy metals like cobalt, tantalum, niobium, and other metals like copper. Now, what is interesting with those metals is that in the Congo, in the eastern part of the country and the southern part of the country, there is a lot of those, especially for cobalt. Cobalt, 60% of the cobalt world production today do come from the Congo. I think the share that Europe import is about 70%. My presentation will probably be focusing more on the historical side of things and how does raw material extraction affect a society, affects the politic of the country, and affects the people in the country. And then Matthias will probably talk a little bit more about the technical part of the actual mining itself. But my part will focus more on how does raw material trade has affected the Congo from the 1400 until about 1965. Yeah. So in the 1200s, the Congo used to be a pretty big empire or kingdom. As you can see the green there on the map, this is what more or less the Congo was looking like. So it was stretching from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, covering a number of countries. And there were already very well established trade routes, crop and fish trade routes, and the trade route was going from, say, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. The first time when the mineral resources were exported from the Congo to Europe was traced back as far as the 1200. And it used to be this cross that you see here. It's made of copper. It was also used as a currency. And during the 1400s, especially the Portuguese, the Portuguese and the British, they were very big explorators, and they are the one who have encountered the most the mineral resources traded out from the Congo to other countries. There was particularly one Portuguese navigator called Geological. He became one of the first European to visit the deepest forests of the Congo. And during his first visit, he eventually set up ties with the first king of the Congo. And during that time, they established trade relationship. And one of the main currency, besides, because that was already the slave trade at that time, it was the natural resources. It was copper, it was iron, and gold and diamond, etc. In the 1500s, there were so many people who were sold into slavery, then the Congo Empire started to collapse, basically, due to lack of human resources, and a lot of the Congolese local authority who did not agree with the trade slave, they were fighting the Portuguese. So a lot of them also a lot of the Congolese people died during the war against the Portuguese. Later on, when slavery was abolished, I think in 1833, there was some sort of a new mapping again of the different African region. And that's when the colonization of African countries by European really took root. So at the Berlin Conference from 1884 to the 1885, the Congo, as well as many other countries in Africa, were in some way associated with the country that was their biggest trades, with whom they had the biggest trade relationship. And the Congo was appropriated and given to the King Leopold II of Belgium as his own personal property at the time. He then established what was called the Congo Free State. And he helped building up that with a British explorer called Henry Morton Stanley. So further down the line, after the Berlin Conference, just keep in mind that we're still talking about raw materials here. And the meaning of raw material has changed also over time, as Matthias has shown in his first table. So probably one of the main raw material that became the predominant trade item after copper and after the trade slavery, it was rubber, because the automotive industry was booming, and there was a lot of in America, for example, there were a lot of rubber plantations, but in the Congo there was wild rubber that was growing in the tropical forests, which basically meant you didn't need to have people planting the rubber trees, but you only needed a lot of workforce to harvest, to get the rubber out. So, of course, seeing that as a big benefit, the King Leopold established a big venture to basically harvest rubber, and the Belgian government lended to him money to start his company. He, of course, carried on to work with Henry Morton Stanley, who traveled through the jungle up the Congo River from the south to the Atlantic Ocean, meeting different local chiefs, and signing alliances with them. And of course, when a chief was not very happy with him, he would arrange to create some sort of conflict locally and get that chief removed and replaced by someone who was more cooperative. So it basically worked like that. So it traveled from one side, from the southern east part of the Congo, all the way to the west coast on the Atlantic Ocean, signing deals with local chiefs and getting them to send people to the rubber plantations. During that particular time, so between 1870s and 1908, so during the Congo Free State time, the King Leopold amassed a huge personal fortune by exploiting the natural resources of the Congo. And it was also probably one of the darkest periods of the colonization for the Congo, because during his ruling, about half of the population was wiped out. So every people who was able to go to the forest and harvest rubber had to go to the forest, and every single person has a quota that they had to bring back per day. And whoever was not able to bring the quota that it was assigned to was punished. And these are maybe some horrible pictures, but if you're too sensitive, please don't look at them. But people were cut and then harmed if they were. That was basically the punishment. If a person was not able to achieve the quota that they were assigned, and it didn't really matter if it was men, women, or kids. The second target for the King Leopold, after establishing a massive rubber venture, he decided that because the country was so big, for moving around the rubber, it was quite expensive. So he undertook to build a railway that would go across the Congo. And we're talking about here tens of thousands of kilometers. So in 1908, sorry, because the King Leopold had spent so much money in his venture, and he borrowed so much money to the Belgium state that he was not able to reimburse, especially when he decided to go for the railway. He got to the point where he was not able to reimburse anymore to the Belgian government. And for paying his debt, he decided to hand over his venture, which was the Congo Free State, to the Belgian government. And the Congo then became the Belgian Congo. In 1906, still during the colonization, a couple of years before Belgium went from King Leopold to the Belgian government ruling, the biggest mining company in Central Africa was established, the Union Minière du Haut-Katanga. They were producing gold, copper, zinc, germanium, silver, gold, and they also produced hydroelectricity. So from that moment on, it went from producing, so the Congo, the main raw material from the Congo went from rubber to metal, as the technology and the industrial area was shifting more towards what we do know today. So the Union Minière du Haut-Katanga became the largest and the most profitable mining company in Central Africa. In the 1920s, now the environment has changed. People are not anymore getting their hands or their legs cut because they're not reaching a quota in the mining company, etc. But the working conditions are still pretty hard under colonization. It's not exactly the same, but the conditions are still pretty hard. And the first Congolese protest movement started to rise at that particular time in the 1920s. In the 40s, so between 40 and 45, during the time of the Second World War, as the US was developing the first nuclear weapon, using uranium from Canadian mine, the Belgian who had already mapped and discovered a uranium deposit in the Congo. And as they were allies to the US, they actually got into a deal with the US Army so that they would be able to use the uranium from the Congo. So if you look in terms of how rich the uranium from the Congo was, so the concentration of uranium in Canada was about 0.6% of the rocks, while in the Congo the concentration was in some parts reaching all the way to 20% of uranium. So it was very rich mine. And of course, the uranium from the Congo ended up being the one that was used during the manufacturing of the atomic bomb, which in the end led to basically the end of the World War II after the atomic bomb were dropped. So the Congo has played, or the mineral resources from the Congo have played a significant role during that particular time. And immediately after, because the Cold War kind of started immediately after that, so it became a bit of a challenge or a fight between the Soviet Union at the time and the American and the Allies to keep a grip on those mineral resources. But because whoever would be the leader or whoever would have a lot of influence on the Congolese leader will also have direct access to those mineral resources. Now, in the 1950s, the financial prosperity of the post-World War and Belgian government in the Congo was so big, and Belgium itself as a country became a pretty much powerful country in the in Europe. And at that particular time, the Congolese protest movement kept rising. And in 1955, there was then one of the first official or recognized independence fighters movements. The independence fighting movement increased their pressure on the Belgian government until 1959. And in June 1960, the Belgian government, or the King of Belgium, decided to release the Congo as a colonial state and give independence. One of the first high-profile rising leaders was Patrice Lumumba, who immediately after accessing the independence and the election became the prime minister. So that's the picture at the bottom, and at the top, that Joseph Kasavubu was the president. Now, there was a bit of a tension between the two leaders because Lumumba was always accused to be a pro-Soviet, and Kasavubu, so a pro-Soviet and nationalist, and Kasavubu more pro-Western powers. And of course, given the mineral resource asset of the Congo, having two, let's say, antagonic leaders became quite interesting in terms of fights for power between the two leaders. A year after independence and a year into being a prime minister, unfortunately, the ties of Lumumba or the supposed ties of Lumumba and the Soviets took him over, basically. So he was arrested and later on executed. There has been a lot of suspicion about the killing of Lumumba itself. So in the end, or rather lately, during the past few years only, some of the CIA documents were declassified, where they were talking about the surveillance around him and the involvement of the Belgium and the British security services, which they, at the time, they denied. But basically, the background story is that because he was more closer to the Soviets, and because he was prime minister, which meant that he had some sort of a look on the mineral resources in the country, he started to take a lot of space, and basically based on that, he was taken away, removed from the office, and later on executed. In 61, the Congo was still not at space. I would say later on in 61, you can see the different colors here. So Katanga is one of the richest. So Katanga and the red parts, the eastern and southern Congo are, I would say, the metal-rich region, while the western part is more of the oil and gas-rich region, and the central part is more diamond-rich part, I would say. So there were basically three different governments, and each of them had different ties to other foreign countries or foreign leaders. In between 63 and 64, there was probably one of the biggest political crises at the time, when the Katanga region, basically, so the Green Party, decided to become independent. But as most of the mineral resources were, at the time at least, so the Union Minière du Haut-Katanga was extracting a lot of mineral resources for this part of the country, from this part of the country. And the governor at the time decided to make the region independent. There was, again, fight between the regional government here and the central government. And to out that crisis, that was in 1965, one of the, probably the longest served presidents and dictator from the Congo took over, Mobutu. So he was in the army. Politicians were fighting to take grip on power and, of course, mineral resources and all the fame that comes with it. So the army decided to take it all over and to live on the side politician. Of course, with time, Mobutu ended up staying 32 years in power. He made a lot of friends during that time. So he ended up being supported by Belgium, by the US, and by many other Western countries. So as long as he was delivering the raw material, he did make a lot of friends. So of course, he understood that. Mobutu understood that, and he started basically using mineral resources as a leverage against his enemy and for anyone who was his ally. So as you can see, the mineral resources in the Congo, or the raw material, have always been at the center of power. So starting from slaves to rubber, and then more of the metals that we do know today. And I can pretty much sure say that it's not finished yet. So mineral resources are still at the center of power fights in the Congo. I think I would leave it here for now, and maybe Matthias will talk about more of the modern parts from 1965 to today. So this was the social and political and economical parts. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. Matthias, would you like to continue wrapping this up for the Q&A session?
Yes, I would like to. Sorry, I was a bit slow to switch my things on.
No worries.
Yeah,
I would
please.
just before you start, I would just like to note that in the end, we will have a short evaluation and a way for you to write down your name and your email so that you can receive a certificate of attendance. We'll give that link in the end, just to stay around for the whole webinar. We will give that link soon. But Matthias, please continue.
Let me see here. Can you see me?
Yes, perfect.
Sharp, good. I can tell you that outside now it is very dark, and we haven't seen the sun for 2 hours because I'm sitting way up north and there's not much sunlight. So I hope you have more sun where you are. and I wish you could send me some. But anyway, oh, I should share my screen, should I not? Okay. So Jonathan has taken us through the history of Congo, the people in Congo, and sort of the politics around the Congo. I had really wanted to continue with sort of the more recent politics and global events that has led to the situation in the Congo now. We only have 20 minutes and in total, so I would really like to first give you the chance to ask questions. So I'm going to change the program slightly, and I'm going to say that the Congo, after becoming a free nation that is not a colony, has and the time that has and the time up till today has been 50 years or soon 60 years of conflict and civil war in the Congo and in countries surrounding the Congo. I can show you that outline another time, but it has really been a history, the recent history, that has been suffering from conflict in the Congo, in the countries surrounding the Congo, in Rwanda, in Burundi, in Uganda, in Angola, and many of those conflicts have been financed by minerals produced in the Congo, or those conflicts have been driven by wanting to get to those minerals. At the same time, it has been, as always, a power struggle between nations, between strong leaders, between, to a certain extent, also between ethnic groups, although I would like to downplay the importance of ethnicity for the conflicts in the Congo, and rather highlight the question of lack of infrastructure, poor communications, a political situation where outside influences are becoming stronger faster than the institutions and the authorities and the country itself. So Congo is still divided and suffering from outside and inside forces, and many of those are connected to the extraction of minerals. So that's all I want to say. I had a whole line of presentation to show, but just for you to remember that many of the things that we need, or rather that we think we need and that we use, contain materials that come from all over the world. Okay, we cannot control. I cannot decide where the copper in my computer is going to come from. I can't say I want copper from the north of Sweden because I'm a strong nationalist and I think Swedish copper is the best. I cannot choose where it is from. It's not like when I buy vegetables in my shop, then I can decide I want to buy Italian tomatoes, French wine, or something else. When I buy a product that is more complicated and that is assembled in many places, the metals and therefore the minerals that has made that item comes from many places, and some of them will come from something like a place like this. It's a mine site in North Kivu where niobium and tantalum is extracted. These are metals that are used in lot of technology. This particular area is an area of conflict, an area of human rights abuses, of war, and many years and years of civil strife, starting with the events that Jonathan talked about, continuing through the great wars of the Congo, which are enormous world wars, you can call them, where many nations in Africa have been involved, and continuing through the genocide in Burundi, the genocide in Rwanda, and through the Kivu conflict that is ongoing now. And because the economy is not very diversified, the funds for conflict needs to come from somewhere, and the first place to look for is often minerals in the ground, because they're there and they can be extracted. When Jonathan and Pontus were in Kenya and in Nigeria, they visited places where children work with extracting gold from the ground, gold mining. It can be done with simple means of breaking rocks by hand, crushing them, panning them in a pan, letting the minerals pass a mat, picking up the heavier particles, and then adding mercury to extract the gold. And the mercury is, of course, very poisonous. The picture on the right there is a little nugget of mercury and gold. And the mercury is very dangerous to the environment. So just to remind you that the conflict in the Congo is about minerals, but it's also about many other things. And the conflict in Congo is funded by minerals and other things. So we're going to return to the question of that we started off with. I'm going to ask everyone, well, at least Pontus and Jonathan, to switch their. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction.
Maybe while you're looking for that slide, maybe I can make a comment on the connection between conflict and the minerals. So again, the conflict that we're seeing today is not just a conflict that started overnight. So it has roots far back in time. And maybe during the last 15 years in the Congo, the war, the 1997 war was probably a war to take over the power, to remove Mobutu from his seat. But even during that war started in the eastern part of the country. But before walking down even to the capital and take over the power, that armed group walked down south first, because they did understood that if they take control of the mines, it means they cut off the money from the capital city. And basically, you know, it's cutting the head before going and catching the snake. And that's basically what happened. But nowadays, the conflict that we do find locally in the Kivu, so in the eastern Congo, those people are not even interested to walk down to Kinshasa, that's the west coast. They've just been fighting at the same place because they have no interest of going to the capital city, because they're making so much money with just putting on, for example, illegal taxes. So when people are mining, before crossing, for example, from point A to point B, they have to pay some illegal taxes to the armed group. Sometimes the armed group are themselves involved in mining. Sometimes they have people that they force to work in the mine, and then they have to sell to them the raw material to a lower price, and then they send it to a higher price. So that's how the connection is made between both.
Yeah, and I don't know what the questions are going to be. I'm going to return to this image that we had from the beginning. Maybe that's something that we can keep thinking about as questions are coming in. Pontus, are any questions coming into us?
Not currently. I would like to remind you that you can ask questions either in the chat or if you try to raise your hand in the as a Zoom function, if you want to ask it like that.
Because we have 10 minutes now, and I'm wondering how we should best use it. Maybe either return, have a question session. If nothing is coming in, I can return to one of the subjects that you find them more difficult to grasp.
I can ask a question to get us started. Like usually here in Sweden, people, often politicians, they say that we need to extract cobalt in Sweden because all cobalt is coming from children working in the Congo.
But maybe they wonder what cobalt is used for. So if you wonder how your cell phone can keep 12 hours of charge without going off, it is because of 5 grams of cobalt in your cell phone. So that's what it is used for batteries.
Yes, but where does it come from? Like the majority of material, how?
Well, at the moment, about more than 50% of all the cobalt in the world is coming from the Congo. So as we are using more and more cobalt, and as cobalt becomes more and more important for battery technology, above all, there is no way currently to say, let's not take cobalt from the Congo, because then there's no cobalt left for everybody to use. So at the moment, most people are trying to say, how do we make cobalt, or rather, how can we use the resource cobalt to make things better for the people in the Congo? Instead of extracting minerals leading to conflict, how can it be contributing to making people's lives better? And that's a big question, and many people are trying to work that out at the moment.
Yeah, and given that the cobalt's demand will probably increase. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the 2000s, there were barely around 200,000 electric cars in the world. And today it's about 5 million. And in the coming years, it's gonna double or triple. And in each electric vehicle, there is a minimum of 11 to 7 kilograms of cobalt, which means the demand for cobalt is going to increase significantly. So if you look at the numbers, today the total cobalt production in the world is around 160,000, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 160,000 kilograms. So if you take an average of 7 kilos per vehicle, and we do have, for example, let's say we will have 25 millions of electric vehicle in the coming 10 to 15 years, we're talking about an increase of more than the current 160,000 production. So there is definitely a big demand.
Yeah.
I see a question that is coming.
There's a question. Yeah. So who owns the minerals and the mines? Who mostly profits from them?
So, like here in Sweden, the minerals and anything in the ground, it belongs to everyone in Sweden, and it's controlled by the state. So the minerals are owned by Swedes. A person or a landowner cannot own minerals in the ground, and it's the same thing in the Congo. Minerals in the ground in the Congo is owned by the Congolese state. And someone, if you want to take them out of the ground, you have to ask for permission. You have to ask the government for, and according to law in Swedish law, Congolese law, any other law, you ask, can I take this out? Can I make something out of it? Of course, that process of asking to get the minerals out of the ground is not working the same in all countries. And many people would argue that the process of asking for permission to get it out of the ground in the Congo is working less well than, for example, in Sweden. And then who benefits? Well, the person who benefits most is, of course, us here, because we can use these minerals in our things, because it's our demand for these minerals that make the mines open. And secondly, it's probably anyone who uses the minerals and metals in the chain of, so the one who brings the minerals out makes money. Then the person who sells those minerals to the smelter to make a metal makes money. Then the person who uses that metal to make copper wire, he will make money. And the person who sells the copper wire to the car manufacturer makes money. And then the car salesman makes money selling the car to you. And then you benefit from driving the car. So there's a whole chain of people who actually profit from the metal. The question is, the person who actually digs the metal out of the ground, is that person making any profit, or the person who lived where the mine was? So
yeah, exactly. So I think Matthias has shown very well the value chain. But as you can see, the person who actually lives around where the mine is, who will have his entire life disturbed, is probably not taken in consideration very often. In some countries, yes, in some system that works. But when the government or when the state authorities are weak, then there's a problem to provide benefits also to the person who lives around where the mine is. Maybe that person has to move from one place to the other. Maybe he wanted to get compensated. Maybe he used to do farming work, but now if the mine can't do farming work anymore. So there is there's a bit to discuss there.
Yeah, thank you. There's another question here. So under Mobutu, was he the first one to start the privatization process, or did it happen in a different way during the wars?
The privatization of the mining companies.
Yes, I take it like that.
I suppose that. Yeah. So under Mobutu, it was more of what was called nationalization, because it was a transfer of power from the Belgian state to what became Congo at the time. So under Mobutu, there was first of all a transfer of the assets from the Congolese, from the Belgian to the Congolese, although the Belgian really stays in many cases owner or managing the mineral asset for a long time, even after colonization. But in 1974, the President Mobutu starts what was called Zairianization. I will type it in the chat, which was basically to expropriate all the mining companies or still owned by Belgium to the Congolese states. And that process has been very much criticized because it's ended up having some of the company like really literally collapsed, not necessarily because of Mobutu himself, but also those Belgian companies that were owning those mineral assets. They were also controlling all the financial system and the bank accounts, etc. So when they were expropriated, of course, they didn't over the bank accounts. So you ended up having, large, very big company, but with literally no operating money, without money to operate. And that has led to a collapse of, because that actually happened also during the Great Depression in the US. So it was definitely not a very good time to go for such a process of nationalizing the industry. But he went for the opposite. He went for nationalizing instead of privatizing. And the liberalization of the mining sector, so the privatization, happened a lot later. We're not talking about 2001. So that is in very recent year, when the first or the second mining law came into force after the first one, which was still dating from colonial and even pre-colonial time. So the new mineral legislation in the Congo from the recent time came into force in 2001, and then it was revised in 2018. So just about a couple of years ago.
Yeah, thank you. I know that many of you are moving on to another webinar now, and I think we should end on time. So I'm again just posting the link to the evaluation and the way you can get your certificate of attendance. So please go to the link there and go through the very short Mentimeter there. You can do it on your phone if you want to. I would like to thank Jonathan and Matthias for this webinar. It was very nice. Would you like to say a last few words before we end?
Thanks for attending, and I'm looking forward to a time where I can travel to somewhere else, maybe Italy.
Yeah, I guess I'll say thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and I hope the information that you got this kind of help you out to start raising a lot more question about where the minerals that you have in your phone, your gadget, and your computer come from, and what you can do at the personal level to somehow put pressure on the industry so that you'll ensure that the metals in your gadgets are produced in an ethical way and in a way that respects human rights.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope to see you maybe next year in Italy or somewhere else.